Guys, do you hear it? Yes, it's a new episode of Castle Rock, and this might be one of the most revealing yet, so let's get into it. It looks like the show is heading into autumn, and judging by its 10-month production schedule, we'll probably see episode 10 take place in or around winter. The picturesque scenery is accompanied by the familiar sound of the woods we've been hearing since episode 1. Matthew Deaver's casket, which suffered from exploding casket syndrome in episode 5, is lowered into the ground. At his memorial, only the pastor and Henry are there, even though multiple chairs and programs have been arranged. The pastor recites the same line from Corinthians that Matthew Deaver recounted to Molly in episode 3, while Henry continues to be afflicted by the ringing in his ear. The kid is seen for the first time since Alan put a gun to his head. Looks like he's going to enlist his help after all. The kid puts on Matthew Deaver's clothes and finds several letters and sermon tapes. Could these letters be from Odin Branch, who we'll meet later on in the episode? The kid watches old VHS tapes, just like the one Henry burned in episode 3. They depict young Henry walking through the woods in what appears to be the excursions his father would bring him on. Back at the ceremony, we see the two creepy dudes from episode 5 next to an RV. We'll meet them a bit later. Alan meets with the kid, who has told him to pick up something in Syracuse, stating he must do it quickly because time is Ruth's enemy. Is it because Ruth's memory, which she is slowly losing, holds the key? The kid puts on the Walker Brothers' The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore on an identical vinyl player that played Animal Crackers in episode 5's Murder House. Bonus points if you caught the fly in the bottom left. The kid stares at what appears to be a dot where a cross once hung, before falling into Ruth's bed. At the psychiatry clinic, the doctor asks Ruth to do an Alzheimer's screening test, just like what Henry and the kid did in episode 5. Unlike them, however, it doesn't seem like she can remember the words. Alan tells Ruth he has some business to take care of, but when he gets back, he's going to fix her all up. Inside the home, Ruth opens her Lewis chess set, the same one she got from Alan in episode 5. The red and crimson colors not only act as a metaphor for good and evil, but they're also the colors the kid and Henry were given in their psychiatric tests. Historians argue that the Lewis chess pieces were not originally black and white. Rather, stains found on the originals indicated they were red and white. Ruth takes out a queen and a rook who holds a spear. Henry picks up his son Wendell, who seems to be more preoccupied with his video game than with seeing his dad, hinting at a strange relationship. Wendell takes Henry's old room where there's two subtle references to the devil. One, the Tasmanian devil bedsheets, and two, Grant Fuhr, the hockey player who played for the Calgary Flames, flames which are apparently still overtaking the surrounding area. Henry takes Wendell to see Ruth, who both starts and ends the scene staring at something in the corner. We know from previous shots that this is either the mirror or bed, a bed a few scenes ago we saw the kid lay in. Is she seeing something we aren't? Molly gets a call from a potential buyer when she's interrupted by the bandaged man we saw from episode 3. She takes a pill and writes in her notepad in what appears to be a log of her drug use. You can see the date, the word OC, likely Oxycontin, and dosage, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. But notice all the dates say 2017. I'm not sure why this is the case because we're supposed to be in 2018. And here she is giving us the finger, but that's probably just a coincidence. Wendell reads the program for his grandfather's funeral where you can make out the quote from Corinthians. Ruth holds a chess piece by the fridge, hearkening back to episode 2 where Henry found the same piece. Looking out the window, Ruth sees the kid and says, "I could have sworn we buried him in that suit." Now, her memory is pretty shot, so we can't take everything she says at face value. However, with the casket being moved twice, Alan's penchant for digging up graves, and the fact we've never seen the body, is it possible someone opened the casket? Henry retrieves the kid from the side house where he finds him watching old VHS tapes. Matthew refers to young Henry as Evil Knievel, a daredevil, and the volcano Krakatoa, one of the most violent volcanic events in recorded history. Two odd references to the devil and flames. We hear Matthew say, "Which way do you think it is, son?" which is likely referring to the sound, or as we'll later find it called, the schisma. Henry and the kid arrive at Juniper Hill, a psychiatric hospital featured in such books as It, Insomnia, and Bag of Bones. As the kid is taken in, a crow smashes into the ground, killing itself. Traditionally, crows and ravens have been omens of bad luck and death. In other cultures, they've been a sign of mystery and destiny. But considering the fate of this one, it's probably the former. Henry apologizes to Wendell about having to leave when Wendell presses him about his upbringing. Henry was adopted at age 5 after the Devers tried to have a baby, but it died in labor. Wendell asks about Henry's real parents, but Henry skirts the question. Is it possible when Henry burned the VHS tape and said, "F you, Dad," that it was referring to his biological father? Henry then asks Ruth what he and his dad did in the woods. She says camping and hunting, but when he asks her about if he ever mentioned a sound, she feigns ignorance. Out by the woods, Henry's flashbacks intensify. In one of the biggest scenes of the episode, Henry asks Molly if she ever saw him go out in the woods at weird hours of the night. She tells him that she could feel how he hated his father, was afraid, then suddenly relieved. She can't tell him what actually happened that night, only what he felt, and that he wanted his dad dead. She confesses that she was the one who killed Matthew by taking out his breathing tube, but that she wasn't in control. It was Henry controlling her. When I looked down at my hand, it was like it was your hand. We killed him together. Henry calls her crazy and marches off. Pangborn breaks into a junkyard, likely in Syracuse, where he was told to go by the kid. In this scene between Wendell and Ruth, we learn the importance of the chess pieces. She apparently slips between past and present, and the pieces help ground her in reality, somewhat like the totems in Christopher Nolan's Inception. Henry uses the camcorder to retrace his steps as a kid, that is until it runs out of battery. Pangborn retreats back to his truck after turning up empty-handed when we hear on the radio that 8 staff and 6 patients have died in a fire at Juniper Hill. Not to mention 4 patients considered dangerous have escaped. But Pangborn rushes from his car when he sees Dale Lacey's crushed Lincoln pull in. In fact, he's so desperate to get this car that he holds the truck driver at gunpoint to get it. Ruth drops her pills and watches as the kid, who's supposed to be at Juniper Hill but likely escaped, walk in. Notice how he takes off his shoes. Remember in episode 4 how Ruth chastises Henry about how his father wouldn't abide by any click-clacks in the house? There's mounting evidence that the kid is somehow connected to Ruth and Matthew. Henry stumbles upon the 2 creepy dudes who will come to learn are young Willie and Odin Branch. Odin Branch being a weird name considering Odin, the Norse god, hung himself by a tree branch as a form of sacrifice. The idea of sacrificing oneself to gain something, like what Odin did, is echoed later on by Branch. Young Willie, on the other hand, acts as Odin's interpreter and protege. Odin tells Henry that he knew his father, that he considered this his church out here, just like in episode 2 when the pastor says Dale Lacey's church was the forest. They've made their way here for 2 reasons, to listen and to correct young Willie. Whatever this correction is, you can tell by young Willie's face that it probably won't be comfortable, and it may or may not involve a hot poker. The listening, on the other hand, is a reference to the schisma, or as Henry's father called it, the voice of God. Some people never hear it, some people hear it once, and for some it's deafening. Apparently his father could hear it, then lost it. Perhaps why he adopted Henry, because he knew he could hear it and was using him. The schisma is also referred to as the music of the spheres, an ancient philosophical concept that regards proportions in the movements of celestial bodies, the sun, moon, and planets, as a form of music. Music of the Spheres was also the title chosen for the musical foundation of the video game Destiny, which, when Henry asks Wendell what he's playing, he says what sounds like Thief of Destiny. Coincidence? The connection with astronomy can be seen in the paintings behind the doctor's office, the flashback Henry sees later on, and how Wendell wanted to be an astronaut growing up.
Want to be an astronaut, you're going to need some meat on your bones.
Schisma, according to Odin, is the sound of the universe trying to reconcile all the possible pasts and presents. Just like how Ruth is trying to reconcile her past and present. But the sound of the universe is getting louder, likely why the ringing in Henry's ear has been getting worse, and since Odin told him that they haven't heard it this loud in decades, it's starting to make more sense why Henry last experienced it this bad when he was a teenager. Apparently Henry's father was building something, a filter to drown out all the unwanted noise so that he could listen to the voice of God. Now I have a crazy theory which I think is going to get a lot of flack, but hear me out on it. Could Odin be Henry's biological father? Now hear me out. Okay, that's a terrible pun considering Odin is deaf, but here's what we know. Matthew and Odin knew each other, and they knew each other well, meeting in the forest for likely years and gaining each other's trust. Odin tells Henry that Matthew conceived of a device, but he never got the chance to build it, like his child who was conceived but died in labor. Then Odin goes on to say, "Fortunately I did," followed by a weird exchange of glances. We also know Odin has the ability to hear the schisma on a powerful level, just like Henry. Perhaps he chose to give up his child because he needed to continue his work, believing it to be more important, kind of like how Henry puts his work before his own son. Matthew, who didn't have a child and having lost his ability to hear the schisma, adopted Odin's child as it was mutually beneficial for both of them. We also know that Odin takes on a protege in a master-apprentice type of dynamic. Could Matthew and Odin's relationship have been like that? Or Dale Lacey for that matter. Odin beckons Henry to the RV, so like any rational person finding two strangers in the forest, Henry agrees to get inside. Odin introduces him to the anechoic chamber, which is used to drown out excess noise, leaving only the schisma, and convinces him to get inside, telling him that what he'll hear in there is the truth, that he may find what kind of man he is, why he really came home. As Henry gets inside, Odin tells him he only hears the schisma now after correcting himself, to which Henry replies, "You made yourself deaf?"
Not deaf. Perfect.
Odin locks Henry in the chamber where he experiences his most extreme flashbacks yet. Sounds of the woods, his father saying, "Do you hear it now?" Multiple images of the car and sand from episode 5. A finger with a ring and blood on it as if someone is cutting a wrist with a piece of glass. The face of the kid both in a picture that mimics those from the psych lab and found footage. Bars, young Henry wearing glasses, the man with the cane, and shots of Henry running through the woods similar to those seen in episode 3. Alan arrives back with the deed to Warden Lacey's car and tells the kid it should be there tomorrow morning, but something isn't quite right. The kid is bleeding, or at least it's shot to look like it's his blood, and he gives Alan a cryptic message saying, "There will be a monument to Warden Lacey and everyone who put me in that cage." Now, monuments are usually used to commemorate someone or something, but in the biblical days, the word monument meant tomb or grave. The kid finishes by saying, "Why would you leave me in that trunk, Sheriff?" A throwback to when Alan let Dale Lacey drive off with the kid. Alan rushes in search of Ruth to find the house torn apart, blood splattered on the floor and walls, implying that the kid did something, but I don't believe that to be the case. There are a few possible answers here. 1. Ruth, not having taken her pills and becoming increasingly frightened of the kid, did this to herself. Remember, we've seen her do some irrational things. 2. It could be the other escaped inmates from Juniper Hill. 3. Remember what Molly's house looked like in episode 3? Could this be the same thing now plaguing the Deavers? Also, where is Wendell? This episode started to reveal a bit more about what Henry's father was doing in the forest and the greater mystery surrounding Castle Rock. With only 4 episodes left, I think it's really going to start ramping up. Thank you for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I am super pumped because Castle Rock has been renewed for Season 2. I'm also looking for suggestions on other series to do, so leave your suggestions and Castle Rock theories below. Until next week.